Composted, and should it be, strategies for your campus in changing composting marketplace, a college and university recycling coalition webinar. My name is Travis Friedman. I'm a member of the CURC Board of Directors, and I'll be your moderator for today. This webinar is part of our free CURC technical webinar series, which are designed to provide trends, information, and perspectives about recycling. We are hosting these webinars every other month on the first Thursday from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Before we get started, I want to thank the Alcoa Foundation for their sponsorship of the 2015 webinar series. I also want to thank today's program sponsor, Clean River Recycling Solutions, who is celebrating their 25th anniversary manufacturing and selling a wide range of recycling and waste receptacles for college and other settings. Their support allows us to make these free webinars possible. We also want to thank Keep America Beautiful and ASHE, the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, for planning and promotional support for these series. We have a few housekeeping notes to go over for today's webinar. If you have technical problems during the webinar, you can call GoToWebinar's customer support line at 800-263-6317. Because of the size of the audience, all of your lines are muted. You can submit questions at any time using the question panel on the right side of the screen. Simply click the plus symbol to type your question, and we'll read these out loud when we get to the end of the presentations. If you have a note to share with the organizers, use the chat function at the bottom of your control panel to send a note to us. One final housekeeping note, we will be placing all the slides and the recording of the webinar on the CURC site within the next few days, so you can review the session or share it with your colleagues. All right, let's get started. I'm pleased to be joined today by four great speakers: Carrie Oceans, Director of Education, U.S. Composting Council; Dr. Tina Marie Cade, Professor of Horticulture at Texas State University; Shannon LeBlanc, MSc, BSc, Sustainability Coordinator of University of Alberta; and Jesse Quasny, Waste Division and Recycling Coordinator, University of Alberta. The focus of today's webinar is campus food waste collection programs, and are they keeping up with the markets and national trends? What should your program start or stop collecting? And what is the future of food waste diversion and collection and composting? Carrie from the Composting Council will start out with a discussion of upcoming trends in the marketplace and resources to grow your campus food organics program. Next, we'll showcase two campuses' recovery programs making great strides and building their organic recovery efforts with different approaches. Texas State University will describe their closed-loop organic recovery program, where dining halls food scraps are processed through an on-campus windrow system, and finished compost is both sold to the public and used in the U.S. Department Agricultural-funded research greenhouse. We will end with the University of Alberta's comprehensive program that has expanded to recover food organics throughout the campus in coordination with the City of Edmonton's composting program. Let's begin. Carrie Oceans is the Director of Educational and Annual Conference for the United States Composting Council, where his work includes advocacy and policy development in addition to expanding professional development opportunities for composters. Prior to this, he was the head of Stormwater Management Division of Gardening Landscaping, Inc. in Ortonfield, Pennsylvania, where he represented Filtrex erosion control products. Carrie has 25 years of experience in composting education, research, utilization, and promotion, working with Lehigh County Office of Solid Waste, the Rodale Institute, and Cornell University's Waste Management Institute. As a consultant to the professional recyclers of Pennsylvania, he's developed and taught the organics component of PROP's award-winning recycling professional certification program. Carrie, take it away.
Okay, you're making me a presenter? Okay, excellent. Let me just get these started. Okay, you're seeing my screen?
Yeah, you're all good.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks, and I'm thrilled to be here. It's been a pleasure to be here participating in today's webinar. As Travis mentioned, I'm with the U.S. Composting Council, so just a quick message from my sponsor. You can see the mission of the Composting Council here, And basically, our goal is to grow the composting industry in the United States. We're a member-based organization, and we do have many colleges and universities as members, so you're welcome to check us out at www.compostingcouncil.org. This is just a quick overview of what I'll be covering today. I'll be looking at college and university composting, just a quick snapshot. Where is the status of college and university composting, and what are some trends, some successful elements of successful programs, and a little dive into the trends that are affecting programs, specifically the role and growth of compostable materials, and then I'll conclude with some resources for you for follow-up. So, what does college and university composting look like today? Well, it's been fun for me to go around and review various websites and resources to take a look at what is the status of college composting. And I put together this one slide to try and summarize all the various ways that colleges are getting into this or are proceeding with this. Starting from the upper left-hand corner, you see an earth tub at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Earth tub is a small in-vessel system able to handle up to a couple hundred pounds per day of food scraps. Moving around clockwise, University of Maryland is doing composting, and here you can see the signage that they have in their cafeteria for helping students separate the compostables and the appropriate things from the inappropriates. St. John's University in New York City has built their own composting system under the tutelage of Peter Moon of O2 Compost. You can see a little window into the blower system and the covered bins that they're using. Going around now to the bottom right corner, Austin Community College has trains food service professionals and chefs, and here you can see one of their students contributing from learning how back-of-the-house materials can be composted. Recognition that there's lots of other composting besides food waste, lots of other materials to compost besides food waste. Here you see Washington State University's bin system for composting the manures from their research farm, and Cornell University's windrow turner for composting manures, landscaping debris, and food waste in the turned windrow system. And then wrapping up in the bottom left corner, Ohio State University is among a number of major universities that are doing game day composting, recycling, and have really moved to make stadiums and arenas green by being able to collect and compost their food scraps. And you can see, in fact, what they call food waste is mostly paper and other compostable materials. There is some food in there, but that's not the majority. And that is a great trend that we're seeing now. So I'm going to pause for a second here and ask about who is with us today. So we're going to do a poll. You'll see that popping up in front of you. You have 45 seconds to answer the poll. And tell us whether or not you are currently collecting food scraps for composting, whether or not you're in the process of planning or piloting a collection program, or whether or not you're not actively planning but you expect to do so in the future.
Just as a quick note, you guys have 15 more seconds to respond to the poll. All right, so the results are 58% say they are currently collecting food scraps for composting, 22% say they're planning or piloting a food scrap collection program, and 20% say they are not actively planning but expect to have developed a food program.
Okay. Well, that's great. That is exactly what I would have expected from this group. So we've got about half of you doing something and about a quarter each piloting or expect to in the future. So I asked that because one of the things that we know from social sciences, and if you've taken economics or other courses, you might have come across this model of how an innovation, a technology like composting might spread through society, beginning with the real innovators, the developers of the technology, and then the early adopters. And those of you who said, yes, you're already doing something, you're right there in the early adopter stage. Once you reach a critical mass, somewhere around 10%, then we see the early majority adopting this, followed by a slightly more risk-averse late majority, and there's always some that are laggards. Down in the bottom right, you'll see this trend line, and that's the unfortunate or possibly fortunate innovations that, for one reason or another, do not take hold. So where is composting at this time? Well, we know that there's colleges and universities about 4,700 across the U.S., and that's 2-year and 4-year colleges. So I went into various data sources and came up with a number of around 350 campuses with composting programs at this time. So we're not quite at the 10% rate, but we're certainly closing in on that, and that trend is increasing. So I was very excited to be able to put those numbers together and do that count. So we're just about close to that 10% range where we can really start to see significant growth of this technology. You might be interested in knowing where that data came from. And so here's the sources. EPA Food Recovery Challenge has a list of colleges, list of everyone that signed up for that, including 147 colleges. Now, not all of those may be composting. Some of them may be diverting for food recovery, for or other feeding the hungry, that kind of program, which are great, and always want to do that first with food that's still usable, but eventually can't be used. Recyclemania has a list of colleges that are participating, and there are 145, of which only 30 were duplicates to the Food Recovery Challenge. ASHE has their self-reporting system called STARS, and had them run the numbers, and they had 137 colleges reporting composting, which only 49 were duplicates of the above 2. Plus I did some online searching, and so altogether came with this number of about 350 colleges and universities that are composting at this point. And that's just the food waste composting. That doesn't include, most campuses probably at this point have composting or sending their landscape debris to composting. If they're an ag school and have manures, there's a good chance that they're composting their manures, but this is just on the food waste. So that brings me to my second poll. Another way to ask who's with us today is to ask, where are you, what part of college are you representing? Are you a student? Are you a faculty member, administrator, someone involved in building your grounds, or someone involved in food service? So we've got altogether 45 seconds to answer this poll.
Fifteen seconds left.
And you'll see why I asked this in just a second.
So
interesting.
the answer is 11% student, faculty/administrator, 30%, 16% building, grounds, or maintenance staff person, 5% food service staff, and 38% non-college.
Excellent. Okay, so So the reason I asked that, that's a really good distribution there, because one of the things I've observed in doing the research preparing for today's webinar is that there are some important features of successful programs. And the first really important feature is that in designing and instituting the program that you have involvement from all the key stakeholders. And those are the groups that I just asked about. The students, the administration, the other groups that you see here. If you're going to do collection of food waste and composting of them, all those groups need to be involved from the get-go, or you're bound to run into snags. And that's if you're going to be composting on-site. If you're going to be composting off-site, collecting material and sending it to an independent composter, then you also need a hauler and the composter involved. So that's my first message there, is that as you're looking to grow your programs, expand your programs, or start your programs, make sure everyone that's going to be involved in this is involved from the beginning. The second key feature that I recognized is that there's always a champion, and any of those stakeholder groups can be the champion. Often it is a student group, an environmental club, or a zero waste club that is pushing this, but it can be faculty, it can be an administrator who has been hired as the sustainability coordinator. It can even come from dining, although that's less. They tend to take their orders more from the college than vice versa. But all the major dining organizations that serve as the colleges all have good history and are willing to work with the colleges. So having a champion is important, and because a champion, all of you in colleges and universities know what it can be like to work through the bureaucracies of colleges and universities, so you need someone that's going to keep that process moving. And finally, that a pilot study is used for either starting or expanding, so that you can test technologies, test the messaging, test the techniques, and do so with lower risk and at lower cost. So those are one of my messages for today, is that you remember this when you're designing your program to increase the likelihood of being successful. Okay, now I'm going to dive into some of the trends that are affecting the composting systems around the country and the growth on colleges and universities. And the first one is that there's a significant growth over the last 10 years of curbside collection programs, that are programs in municipalities and that are set up to collect compostables, food scraps from their residents. And you see this from Biocycle magazine, their analysis of the state of composting, and showing the growth in number of municipalities with collection programs. But it's important to recognize that these are not evenly distributed around the country, and even if they were, 198 would not be very many. So we still have a long way to go. We know that from EPA that only about 3% of food waste is currently being composted. And part of the issue here is that these are not evenly distributed, that if we look at this is a chart of single-family households with access to the collection system by state, that were strongly skewed towards the west. We have California, Washington, Oregon are the three leading states. Texas and New York follow, and New York is certainly, because the New York City program is expanding to 100,000 households for their pilot program. That's the bulk of that state. So this is an important trend, though, and we recognize that as colleges have access to curbside programs, they're going to be more likely to participate, because it's one thing to do the collection and the education to collect the things, but then to actually compost it on site, while it has a lot of advantages in terms of faculty involvement and as a teaching tool and for teaching students both how to do it and why to do it. It's an effort, and it takes cost and takes time. And so as people have access to that, to curbside collection, I think we'll see increased acceptance of the collection programs. We've also seen some colleges that were doing it on site. When they have access to off-site composting, they will switch that. And I was interested to see that Ithaca College, which in upstate New York, which had one of the earliest composting programs that I was aware of, going back over 20 years, last year when CURC Compost and their curbside collection became available, they switched to diverting to not doing their own composting. Another important trend is there's some new policies that are being implemented around the country. Number of states, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Northeast, have implemented bans on sending organics to landfills or have mandated collection if a composting infrastructure is in place. Cities like New York have adapted that. San Francisco has been doing it a long time, and we know California has really been leading the way. But other states, Maryland has proposed a ban. It wasn't adopted last year, but they'll be back trying it again. New Jersey, some Minnesota, or at least the St. Paul, Minneapolis area. So this is a really growing area, and obviously as these policies become implemented, infrastructure grows and colleges have access to those programs, they're going to be more likely to participate. And finally, there are some technologies, trends that I'd like to highlight. One of them being the growth of forced air systems. You saw in my original pictures of college composting some aeration system developed for St. John's University. These systems, while they seem to be more expensive, they often do, and if you cost them out over a lifetime, they are not. And they do have some advantages in terms of odor control, footprint minimization, which means stormwater management's easier. They are more finicky, though. That is, they do take a higher level of expertise to manage them compared to the turned windrow systems. And then there's some improved screening technology. This is technology for removing physical contaminants like plastics, glass, and metal. In fact, we've seen some states start to propose actual regulatory limits on these contaminants in finished compost because they want to make sure that what's going out and being used is clean, and in fact, in terms of marketing your compost, you need to have really limited physical contaminants. And so we've seen some technology vendors really stepping up and doing some innovation to improve the screening potential for their finished material. Not cheap, certainly, but effective. And the reason this is coming up is my last trend that I'm going to point out is the rise of compostable materials to replace some of the plastics, or replace as many of the plastics as possible, which are contaminants in the compost. So, compostables, something I'm sure you've all run into or at least heard about, if not are actually using. So these are materials that are replacing plastic cups, knives, spoons, takeout containers, bags that are not degradable and are not compostable with compostable alternatives. They're been on the market now for going on 15 years, but they've really improved, and we're really seeing them try more and more to work with composters and the full value chain to make sure that they are useful. They are not the same as bioplastics, and that's a point of confusion I wanted to just step aside to talk about for a second. Bioplastic refers to the source of the material. So if it comes from plants, corn starch, potato starch, that's a bioplastic. Bioplastic can be made compostable, or it can be made non-compostable. It could be a durable like a plant bottle. This is a chart that I pulled from a European source, but it's worldwide production of bioplastics, and you can see the darker blue are the compostable ones, or in their terminology, biodegradable, whereas the lighter blue is the growth of the non-degradable but bio-based plastics, and that's predicted to be a much stronger growth as big beverage manufacturers replace their conventional plastics with bioplastics. And that's a good thing. It is replacing a petrochemical with a short-term carbon, so less impacts on the global climate change, but not relevant as far as composting. So we want compostables. We don't whether they're bioplastic or not. We do want these materials to be compostable. What that means is that they break down under composting conditions. That's the high heat, the high humidity, and the intense microbial action that happens in a composting process. The standard that the association, the ASTM, I forget what it stands for, ASTM standard for compostability means that it degrades within 180 days. 90% of that carbon is converted to biomass or released as carbon dioxide. Also, that what's left passes through a very small screen, a 2 millimeter screen, so it's essentially invisible, and that the resulting compost is safe to use. As you may have inferred, this is not the same as biodegradable. Biodegradable is understood to degrade at ambient temperatures, not require the heat and the intensity of a composting system. So you can make a compostable plastic out of either bioplastic or a petrochemical plastic. Certainly most of them are bioplastics, but not all of them, and it's really the compostability is independent of the source. The Federal Trade Commission really is the one that specifies what is legal to call, when it's legal to call something compostable versus biodegradable. And biodegradable is that would have to be understood to break down in the ambient conditions within a half a year to a year, whereas composting has to meet these standards. The only way to know if something is really compostable or something being claimed as compostable but not necessarily is to know that it's been certified by a third party, independent third party, and in this country that would be the BPI, the Biodegradable Products Institute. So BPI, if you go to their website, they have a fantastic catalog, searchable for all the material, all the products that they certify. You can, as you can see here, you can search by category, you can search by name. It's very robust. They're constantly adding to it. So this is a really great source for your food service vendors to identify where to buy, where to access these materials, what's actually going to work for them. And just a quick snapshot. I went onto the BPI website and just to pick some examples of different types of materials, from cups to plates, even straws. That are all these materials are compostable. And as Steve Bojo, the executive director, pointed out to me recently when I was getting ready for this, is that essentially there is no product required for food service that can't be used, for which a compostable alternative is not available. And one thing I'll just mention, I highlighted here plastic ones, but certainly in the plates and bowls and the cold cups, there are also paper or fiber-based alternatives besides the plastic-based ones. But must be certified compostable. Not everything is rosy in the world of compostables. There are still issues. You've probably heard about those as well. There's some greenwashing. That is that there are things that are labeled as biodegradable or possibly oxo-degradable, but would not meet the standard of compostable, and so may not actually function in the composting process. To help address that, we at the Composting Council have produced a model labeling law. So in California, right now, if someone is greenwashing, and unless you're in California or I believe Washington, your only alternative is to go to the Federal Trade Commission to try to get them to take action. But if your state passes a labeling law that says what's legal, then it makes it easier to go after those bad actors. And so we have a model labeling law on our website. We also have labeling guidelines, so make it easier to tell if a specific product is compostable or not by how it's labeled. There are inconsistent results. That is, some products, even certified products, don't always work, and we're not completely sure why that's true. We're still working to do research and working with the producers to understand. It seems to do with possibly the moisture regime. Some composters don't have, especially in the arid areas of the country, their compost runs dry, and that could be an effect. Some compostable plastics, if it gets too hot, there's some changes in the molecular structure that may be affecting their compostability. And some is just time. That the standard is to fully degrade within 6 months, but many composters are producing compost in 3 months to 4 months. So some of it is still left when they screen out their compost. If they were able to run longer, they would fully degrade, but they have other pressures, and so they can't do that. And so we really encourage composters to, if they're being approached to degrade a new material they haven't worked with, to test it in their process before they go full steam ahead. And the last issue I want to highlight is that compostable plastics, even though as tested they do fully degrade, are not currently allowed as a feedstock for compost destined for organic production. So if your compost or your composter is only selling to certified organic farms, they won't be able to use these compostable plastics. What many composters are doing who are in that situation is basically creating separate piles, organic piles that's going to go to organic farms, and other compost that can be used more generally in landscaping or other farming but not certified organic. There is a petition underway. The process for changing that is a petition process, but it's a lengthy process, so we don't expect that to change within the next year or two. Okay, I'm just about to wrap up here. I just want to highlight a few resources for you all. There are a couple of great webinars that have already occurred on this topic that I'd like to highlight. EPA did a webinar last year on composting strategies, highlighted a couple of colleges as case studies, and had a great talk by Peter Moon about what's involved in a forest air system. CURC did a webinar last year on a deep dive into food waste program that my colleague at Resource Recycling, Nicole Chardul, helped design and do, and that's a great resource for you. ASHI has great resources. The Grassroots Recycling Network has a nice page on campus composting. If you want more information specifically on compostable plastics, you can go to we have a sister organization called the Composting Council Research and Education Foundation, CCREF, and they have a new toolkit called the CP Toolkit, or Compostable Plastic Toolkit. And I just had a conversation with the Post Landfill Action Network, a student-based group that many of you are probably familiar with, and they're going to be producing a guide to campus composting over the summer that I hope to help them with, and will be a great resource for you all. And with that, that concludes my time. There you go, some contact information, and if you're interested in really diving deep into the world of composting, you're welcome to come to our annual conference in Jacksonville this coming January. Great time to come to Florida.
Thank you very much, Kerry. Now I want to turn to our next speaker, Dr. Tina Marie Cade. Dr. Tina Marie Cade, Professor of Horticulture at the Texas State University, manages the Bobcat Blend composting program that collects and processes campus cafeteria waste. She also manages the Bobcat Bloom Floral Nursery Sales Program, sells items weekly, as well as produces seasonal crops such as poinsettias and Easter lilies. She advises the Horticultural Club, the Environmental Service Committee, the Phi Alpha Psi Horticulture and Floriculture Honor Society, and the Polo Club. She is an adjunct faculty for the Department of Biology at Texas State and the Department of Horticultural and Natural Sciences at Texas A&M University. She is associate editor for the Journal of Hort Technology and the Journal of Texas Agriculture and Natural Resources. Please take it away.
Hi, and thank you. I'm excited to give everyone a glimpse of the Texas State Campus Composting Program, Bobcat Blend, and we're here in San Marcos, Texas. So I'm hoping everyone had a chance to see the program in action at the video that was sent out. The link was sent yesterday, and it gives just a brief overview of the program in action. On the next slide, you'll see our Bobcat Blend program mission. We are a faculty-managed and student-run program. We're entirely grant-supported, and part of our mission is to do research and teaching using the program while conducting waste management. On the next slide, a little overview of our history. We started thinking about composting on campus around 2005. At that time, it was estimated that approximately 300 tons of food waste was being deposited into the sewer system, and the university was being charged around $60,000 a month in sewer surcharges. So in 2006, we started looking for grants for composting. And in 2008, we hit on an Environmental Protection Agency grant that wasn't for composting food, but instead was to work with managing invasive species, specifically those that were occurring on the San Marcos River here, where the headwaters are in San Marcos on campus. So at that time when we obtained the grant, we started constructing the sites, and we obtained different permits that would allow us to deal with handling the invasive species as well as composting food waste on campus. In 2009, the site was finished, and we were able to begin composting. And as Carrie talked about, we tried to start off small with just collecting from 2 different dining halls the pre and post consumer waste on campus. During the years 2012 through now, we've expanded our collections, and we've tried to work within our budget by increasing volunteer support to help handle the increase in collections, which I'll give you some statistics on shortly. On the next slide, it tells you a little bit about our compost site, which is located 10 miles away from campus. It took us about a year to find a suitable site because our campus is on top of an aquifer, so we weren't able to compost on top of the soils that are on campus. So instead we had to go out to where there were heavier clay soils and that were able to be suitable for composting there. The site is 5 acres in size, and it's located on about a 30-acre property, so we're able to be kind of away from the road and everything. Our site includes about 2.5 acres for the actual composting area, and then 2.5 acres for a catchment pond. So the site was constructed so that it's sloped and bermed, that all of the runoff that comes off of the site it goes towards the catchment pond. It's fenced so that we can keep basically grazing cattle out of the site, because the surrounding 30 acres sometimes does hold cattle. And it does have water and electricity sources on the site. And outside of the fenced area, we needed to allow for a 50-foot easement that allowed for fire department access. So our site is considered a fully functional municipal solid waste site according to TCEQ standards. On the next slide. On the next slide there, it includes our campus collection sites, which include all of the past and current sites where we've collected. These include our dining halls, where we collect all of the food waste, including meat and dairy products, pre- and post-consumer waste from those dining halls. It also includes the Student Center, the Family Consumer Science Nutrition Labs, the Honors Coffee House, and we do collect from the agriculture gardens and greenhouse all of the dead plants or pruning waste. We collect grounds waste, the leaf and tree limb litter. Again, invasive species that come off of the river from the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment, which is part of our campus. Occasionally we have specialty types of research projects, like one where we were getting invasive species of fish from the biology department. Sometimes we're invited to collect food waste from special campus events, different parties and such. And then we've been recently partnering with the city of San Marcos to set out trailers to get seasonal collections of leaves and pumpkins at Halloween at particular city drop-off points. On the next slide, you'll see an overview of our Green Bucket program, which is a special program that we initiated because we were getting more requests to pick up from departmental offices and individuals, and this was stretching our staff resources. We hated to say no to collecting green waste, but we only had so many staff, and again, we're entirely grant supported, so we have to use our resources really efficiently. So with that, we were getting recycled containers, old pickled jars, plastic containers from the cafeterias, and we retrofitted those to have filters, and we redistributed them with a map and what was suitable to put into the bucket, and we showed folks where they could drop off their green waste. So when we weren't able to expand to particular offices, we were able to say, well, you can collect waste, and there's a drop-off location for the green waste near your office here. And we were also issuing those to students in dorms and apartments. So that allowed more efficient use of our laborers and of the containers that we had. On the next slide, you'll see the type of equipment that we use to run our program. Includes a GMC truck with towing capacity, of course, a Bobcat that allows us to turn our piles. And we have two different trailers. A cage trailer that I mentioned earlier is perfect for collecting things like leaves and the pumpkins with the city. And we also have a dump trailer that's shown there in the picture. We also had a pediporter, which is basically a large tricycle with a truck bed, and that we quickly outgrew the capacity that we were collecting, outgrew the little pediporter, so we're not able to use that anymore. Carrie talked a little bit about screeners, and screeners were really expensive, but we wanted to be able to run the program where we could screen to a 1/4 inch and use the compost back on campus. And we were able to have the agriculture mechanic classes construct a screener, and we went through a couple of different styles, and we finally have one that works pretty effectively for screening the composting and getting it to marketable types of conditions. So that's allowed us to run full circle with these successes. On the next slide, you'll see some of the research that has helped fund our program. Again, we haven't really gotten any funding to work especially with the composting of food waste, but instead our big grants have come from investigating whether the large-scale composting system is effective at killing all of the little tiny propagules, the little plant parts that could spread invasive species. So we've worked a lot with the river species that occur here and on the Rio Grande River, including water hyacinth, water lettuce, wild taro, and hydrilla. And then we've also gotten funding to look at sargassum, which is the brown seaweed that comes in down at the coast. So we've looked at whether the compost piles will get hot enough to totally kill all of those little plant parts. We've also tried to document our effectiveness at being economical on campus with economic studies of the campus compost collection, and here using our campus as a model. And we've looked at other agricultural types of wastes that come off in Texas, including wool waste from sheep. We are doing a little bit of worm composting, and we've done studies related to the economics and the popularity of worm castings here. We've looked at compost specialty blend studies, so would specialty blends get more at the market compared to just a regular blend of compost? So for instance, the wool waste compost we've looked at, and sargassum brown seaweed has some similarities to the liquid seaweed that you would find in some horticultural markets. So we've looked at that. And then most recently we've been doing some studies related to compost tea as well. So for instance, we're studying at the golf course whether applications of compost tea to some of the tee boxes result in higher quality turf compared to those that are using more traditional means of management. We've also been applying compost tea to see whether it's an effective management for fire ants, which are a big pest here in Texas. Another one of our missions is for teaching. So we've used our site a lot in field trips with our agriculture classes, with the family consumer science students, and we have a master's in sustainability studies here at Texas State. We've also had different groups come out to the site, including a regional solid waste group and the Texas Organic Farm and Garden Association, the Edible and Sustainable San Marcos groups. Field trips have also been with the City of San Marcos Parks and some elementary and middle school students in the region. And then occasionally we'll have other university representatives coming to look at how our program operates. Again, the site is 10 miles away from campus, so sometimes it's not the easiest place for folks to visit. So on campus, we also have our worm composting shed, our vermicomposting unit, and that's at our building in our gardens. And so we've used that too. And the next slide shows you a little image of the shed, and again, it's a way to show composting in a smaller space, producing a high-value alternative ag product. We're still processing some of the cafeteria waste in those areas, and we basically have some shelves that hold worms and bedding and trays, and we've incorporated the shed into our organic gardening class, and we use some of the castings towards production in our living library campus gardens. And it's a popular option too when we have our plant sales on campus with our Bobcat Bloom program. On the next slide, it talks a little bit about outreach. Our students who have been leaders in the Bobcat Blend program are participating recently in conducting master composter classes in collaboration with the City of San Marcos. The students help to instruct folks to become master composters. So basically our students are now training the community in what they need to do to compost. We also have students who go to the farmers market and they sell compost tea and vermicastings at least monthly there, and with that too, of course, they're educating folks on what compost tea and compost is. So that's been a really good outlet too, and getting a little bit of income towards supporting the program. Again, I mentioned that we have field trips, and the students regularly do also have on and off campus guest lectures they have booths on the quad during, things like Earth Days, and they go out to the schools and garden clubs and talk about the program and compost. We try to regularly measure our value and our impact of the program as evidence for the university as to what our impact is. Again, we are faculty managed and student run. Our staff includes one graduate student manager most of the time, and then 6 to 8 undergraduate students. We've measured the cafeteria waste collected, and again, we started collecting in 2009. In 2010-2011 school year, we were collecting 26.4 tons. Remember, that was with just a couple of the dining halls being included. And then we went towards expanding the program. So we hit a peak collection of 140.5 tons during the 2013-2014 school year. Some of the cafeterias went under renovation this past school year, so we collected less at 81.1 tons, but we also collected several yards of grounds waste, and again, we collaborated with the city on collecting some leaf waste and then lots of river waste too. Initially, we were trying to weigh just on small portable scales that we could take on our truck, but once we started collecting in like 2011, 2012, we had to go to where we were visiting a city recycling center and measuring on a truck scale. Part of our impact also includes that we increased the recycling rate because some of the cafeterias and dining halls didn't have recycle bins until we were able to put out our composting bins. On the next slide, you'll see, again, we do try to measure our impact with research, and our students in doing research are developing hands-on experiences, and then they're publishing and presenting results at national meetings. Some of the compost products that we've been testing, some have gone into the industry now, and again, it allows us to document our efforts and reflect and improve the program. On the next slide, you'll see that we have won some campus and local regional awards, and that's resulted in positive publicity for the department and the university. So these are regional, university, and statewide. On the next slide, you'll see part of our impact is that, again, we're going full circle where the compost that we've created using cafeteria waste is being used in our campus greenhouses and gardens. So this has reduced the cost for materials such as compost for our gardens and potting mixes for our greenhouses. Of course, compost is a valuable horticultural product that helps improve the health of plants, so that's reduced the need for irrigation and fertilizers, and it helps keep our plants healthier too. After the use of the compost in the gardens and greenhouse, we still had some excess, so we were able to sell those to, this past year we sold 140 yards to the local community gardens, the city, the faculty and staff that are on our mailing list on campus, and then it's been popular too with a local tree care company that's purchased hundreds of yards from us. So the funds are again rolled back into the program. On the next slide, you'll see too, some of our impact is that our students who run through the Bobcat Blend program are in demand. So Texas is the second largest producer of compost in the U.S., and our graduates have gone out to places like Texas Disposal Service, the City of Austin, TCEQ, and some have gone on to study for their doctorate too. Sometimes I find it's even hard to keep them around until graduation because folks are approaching them about coming out to work before they actually finish up. The students also have reported that they learn not only composting and waste management skills, of course, but because of their involvement in the program, they've developed leadership and teamwork skills, managerial skills. Again, they're going out and doing lots of public speaking and small engine skills in working with some of our equipment. On the next slide, you'll see too, the environmental impact of the program includes the whole campus. So we're hoping that students seeing the bins and participating in the program are developing lifelong skills, habits that they'll take with them after graduation. So besides the students that are involved in helping to make the compost, of course, they're going out and educating the students in the dining halls. And so the program includes faculty, students, staff, all across campus daily, all year long, and in all majors. Some of the challenges of the program are that, again, it's entirely grant funded, so I'm always having the pressure of trying to find funding to keep us active. We also regularly have some equipment failure and maintenance, so things like the dump trailer will stop dumping, the Bobcat. Just to have a mechanic come out to the site is $1,000 just for the visit, not including trying to fix it then. And if one piece of equipment goes down, that keeps us from being able to go out and make collections sometimes. So those failures and maintenance can be really expensive. Another challenge is that the students are constantly turning over because they graduate, so we'll train staff and we have to be constantly training staff so that they can come back in and take over as people are graduating. Sometimes, though, with inconsistent funding, it's hard to have enough money to be able to have good overlap between the students who are coming in and the students who are going out. Another challenge is that the kitchen staff and the managers also have a turnover rate, and like Carrie was talking about, those are stakeholders, and so sometimes we just find that we constantly have to be educating the staff and then also the students who are in the cafeterias. So we sometimes also will have contamination in bins, and that doesn't really frustrate us. Contamination being that students they won't sort their materials effectively, so we'll get regular trash in with compostables, and we can handle that out at the site. It's not that big of a deal, but the cafeteria managers will sometimes then see that it's really, really contaminated, and then they won't then move it to our bin. So that frustrates those folks when they're processing stuff with us. On the next slide, it tells you some considerations in funding for our program. Again, we have usually one graduate student and 6 to 8 students who are helping to collect and move compostables to our site. This can cost around $43,000 for us per year. Again, that includes that I'm not paid anything to oversee, of course. The graduate student manager can sometimes be funded by the department or college on a different type of stipend or scholarship. That usually comes out to be about $16,000 that they would cost on stipend. Though $46,000 can be an obstacle for some, of course, this is much cheaper than a lot of recycling programs that are running, and this includes the fuel for the truck. Again, our site's 10 miles out, and for the Bobcat, and the maintenance costs can vary. Sometimes that can be a little low if we have a really big problem with one of our pieces of equipment. And we're getting those funds, again, from donations, grants, and what we can build on our own, like the screener and the AgMech group. Of course, again, we're earning some money from sales, and then we often will be scavenging items too. So that concludes my talk. Again, my email is listed there if you have more questions than we get through during our question and answer period. Thank you again for coming today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cade. Our next panelists are Shannon LeBlanc and Jessie Kwasny. Shannon LeBlanc is the Sustainability Coordinator for the Energy Management and Sustainability Operations at the University of Alberta. She works with various units within the Facilities and Operations portfolio to contribute to the research, development, implementation, monitoring, evaluation, and ongoing improvements of sustainability programs and initiatives related to the University of Alberta operations. In her nearly 4 years with the University of Alberta, Shannon has helped coordinate projects related to waste diversion, food systems, transportation demand management, greenhouse gas emissions reporting, and public sustainability reporting through the ASHE and STARS platforms. Shannon holds a master's degree in microbiology and biotechnology from the University of Alberta and formerly co-led a student and staff sustainability advocacy group, the Campus Sustainability Coalition, during her tenure as an MSc student. Jessie Kwasny is the Waste Diversion and Recycling Coordinator at the University of Alberta. Her responsibilities include the planning and implementation of waste diversion and recycling program, identifying annual targets for diversion rates, and developing strategies to meet these targets. Jessie also oversees and administers training to internal and contracted staff members on the correct procedures related to waste diversion and recycling at U of A, and also plays an integral part of coordination and support of the U of A team carrying out the BOMA Best Building Certification Program. Jessie has been working in the waste management industry for 6 years with specific focus on waste diversion for institutions and municipalities. Jessie started her post-secondary education at NAIT, graduating with a diploma in biological science and technology. For the 3rd year now, she has been an RCA board member and has been a part of the IC&I committee to help them research their objectives and encourage waste reduction and recycling in the province of Alberta. Go ahead and take it away, you guys.
Thank you very much, and thanks again for having us today. We're really excited to be here. So as you mentioned, my name is Shannon LeBlanc, and I'm here with Jessie Kwasny. So we're going to be splitting up the presentation today, and I'm going to get us started. So we're going to go over some quick context about the U of A, a little bit of background on waste diversion here, including the most recent goals and drivers for us. Jessie is going to talk about the addition of organics collection and the setup for our new zero waste pilot program that we've been running for the last year. And we'll share some results of the pilot and let you know what's coming next for us. So first, a little bit of context. So the University of Alberta is just over 100 years old and is located in Edmonton, Alberta in Canada. So we're basically just straight north of Montana, if you need a better reference point. We have 5 campuses in the city of Edmonton and 1 in a smaller municipality next door called Camrose. We're a teaching and research institution with 18 faculties, about 400 programs, and over 38,000 students. The large majority of the people and courses are at our North Campus, which is where we'll be focusing today's talk. So as you can see on this slide, we have many different building types that you might expect at a research institution, and of course, lots of places to eat and study, including 4 major dining areas and several other individual locations to buy food. So Aramark is our major campus dining services contractor, and they have 3 large locations plus 20 franchise locations across North Campus. In addition, there are 25 other franchises managed by our real estate services group and 9 food vendors run by our students union. So there's a lot of food vendors and food scraps on campus. I'm highlighting the dining facilities quickly here because our pilot zero waste program is largely focused on some of these major locations, including Lister, Sub, and Hub, which Jessie will tell you a little bit more about. So like many institutions, we started recycling years ago. We started with paper and cardboard in the 70s, followed by beverage containers in the 90s, and then in 2007, after conducting our first major waste audit, we started collecting plastics, glass, light metals, and then organics from some of the kitchen locations. So shown here are typical setups for the multi-stream system that is still in place around most of campus. just to give you a sense of what we've kind of been working with for the last several years. So on the next slide, there are several goals and drivers for us as it relates to waste diversion. So just to kind of set it up for our move to this new zero waste pilot. So in 2012, our institution launched its first sustainability plan with a goal to reach a 50% diversion rate by the end of 2015. We've almost made it there. We're sitting around 42% institution-wide. And as part of our work to reach this goal, we formed a waste diversion working group. Just on the next slide, I've listed sort of who's involved in that working group. This actually relates quite well to what Carrie was talking about in terms of getting all of our stakeholders involved. So it has kind of a nice cross-section of those on campus working on all things waste related. So from our sustainability group to purchasing, to dining, to facilities management. And we also have a unique collaboration with our Faculty of Engineering and with the Edmonton Waste Management Center of Excellence, which is a research organization that does research alongside the City of Edmonton's waste management services. So they've been really integral in forming our waste audit procedures and looking at sort of our waste data over time. As part of that collaboration, we've actually managed to work some of our real waste audit data into coursework, as well as this collaboration has led to a partnership on an anaerobic digestion facility, which is set to open in 2017 at the City of Edmonton's Waste Management Center. So just on the next slide, that facility is, like I said, slated to open in 2017, and we've committed to send 1,500 tons of organics to that facility. And last year in 2014, we collected about 400 tons. So we've definitely got our work cut out for us. So you'll see why our focus has shifted largely to organics moving forward. Additionally, a couple of more factors right now are that our waste collection contract is expiring in 2016. So we're currently working on our RFP for the new contract, which will reflect our new goals with respect to organics and more of a zero waste approach. And in addition, we're currently writing the next version of our sustainability plan, which is set to launch in January 2016. So that's a little bit of background for you. Jessie is going to move now into a little bit more about organics diversion and the pilot program that we've just started.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm going to first talk about pre-consumer organics diversion. According to our waste audits, our landfill waste stream is still composed of 55 to 60% organics. So clearly, when we think about waste diversion, diverting organics is a key piece of the puzzle, not only for maximizing our diversion rate, but getting to that target of 1,500 metric tons of organics. Organics collections informally began at Campus Saint-Jean, our Francophone campus just east of North Campus. In 2006, the campus opened a community garden, which is fertilized with composted organics from the cafeteria and residences. And in 2007, the university then began a formal pre-consumer organics collection pilot project at two major dining facilities, Lister Center and the Students' Union building. Lister Center is run by Airmark and has two main dining areas. The first area, Lister Market, prepares and cooks all of its food on site and produces some of the heaviest and wettest organics on campus. The second area, Marina, consists of fast food and coffee services, which produce a considerably smaller amount of organics. And the Students' Union building also consists of fast food and coffee services and has one dine-in restaurant. This building doesn't prepare nearly as much food as Lister Center, but it's a hub of student activity, houses all of the Students' Union services in the majority of its businesses, and it's also a public event site, which means it's constantly serving customers. When we first rolled out the program in these two buildings, we provided each food vendor with organics and recycling containers and trained all of the staff on how to use the containers, and they just had to supply their own compostable bag. Each year in the fall, I will visit each of the food vendors to retrain all of the staff, update them with any changes to the program, ensure the proper containers are in place, and then answer any questions or address any concerns that they have. The pre-consumer organics collection program has now expanded to all Airmark food vendor locations on campus, as well as the commercial food vendors in Hub Mall, which I will talk about a little later on in the presentation. And on the next slide, I will get into post-consumer organics diversion. Shortly after the pre-consumer pilot began, the program expanded to also include post-consumer organics from the dining areas in Lister and Sub. In 2010, it further expanded to include the graduate residents in East Campus Village, marking the first time that students living in a campus residence had the opportunity to participate in a formal in-suite organics collection program. And then in 2013, the Pinecrest and Tamarack residents also came on board. In 2011, a new pilot office-based post-consumer organics collection program began on the staff-occupied top 3 floors of the newly opened Edmonton Clinic Health Academy, ECHA. Organics containers were available to the staff in their communal kitchens there. And in 2012, the 4th floor of the General Service Building, which is our building, meaning we are often the guinea pigs, we rolled out the same program, but also included for the first time ever collecting washroom paper towels for organics. We then began hosting Recycle It Right Lunch and Learns to improve education awareness surrounding the 2 pilot programs, and in 2013 expanded the program to the Hospitality and Resident Services offices in Lister Centre. The results of these 2 programs will be used to inform future post-consumer organics collection programs in office spaces across campus. And lastly, landscaping waste such as tree and branch clippings are mulched and used in flower beds, or else they are sent for composting. On the next slide, I'll talk about the Zero Waste Pilot Program. So with the pressure to collect that 1,500 metric tons of organics, the university decided to hire Tetra Tech EBA, some consultants, to provide planning and implementation support to improve waste diversion efforts. Their focus would be on the 3 larger producers on campus, so Hub Mall, Sub, and Lister Centre, and a 4-part planning and evaluation process would be used. And the programs rolled out in these buildings would be piloted and monitored, fine-tuned, and then rolled out across campus. And on the next slide, I'll talk more about the 4-part planning evaluation process. As mentioned previously, the Zero Waste pilot programs currently underway in these buildings are based on this 4-part process. So the first one, building characterization. So the objective of this phase was to characterize and assess the current challenges associated with implementing an organics diversion program. This involved assessing the existing waste diversion system and its programs under 4 key groupings. So we looked at policy, management systems and tools, operational infrastructure and services, and lastly, promotion and education. The second phase, conceptual design, was conceptual design. So key stakeholders were invited to participate in a design workshop with the goal of developing a conceptual design strategy for each building that would align with the whole campus waste diversion program. The third phase, implementation. Phase 3 used outcomes from the conceptual design workshop to inform implementation and rollout. And then the 4th phase, evaluation, was conducted in-house and with the Edmonton Waste Management Center of Excellence, and will be discussed a little bit further in detail in the presentation by Shannon. On the next slide, signage. As part of the conceptual design process, we looked at our existing waste diversion signage. During implementation planning meetings, Tetra Tech presented best practices in signage. These examples were discussed with us in detail to examine what works and what doesn't work with the university, and specifically how it related to the university context. So some key best practice factors that were highlighted included having clear, consistent terminology, image-based signs, negative or white space, vivid high contrast images, color coding, slogans and taglines, and then the placement of the signs. So using backboards, the front of the containers, walls, the floors, or banners. And then for the material signs for the Zero Waste Station backboards, which are shown in this slide at the bottom, factors were looking at the size and font of the words, the color on the background, the use of arrows to draw the user's eye down towards the station, hand-drawn graphics, use of materials which are found on campus, and red stop and look signs for key information. On the next slide, we'll look at some of the stations we currently have on campus. So these are a couple examples of our current waste diversion stations. As you can see, they're a 5-stream system, 6 if you include organics, which means a lot of choice for users, and they take up quite a footprint, so sometimes it's difficult to find locations to put them in. On the next slide, we'll take a look at our new Zero Waste stations. So following costing research that Tetra Tech conducted, it was decided to have a 4-stream station: mixed paper, recyclables, organics, and landfills. While not all buildings created a lot of paper recycling, it was deemed critical to the user experience to have consistent number of streams across the different university buildings and campuses. So for the container icons, which are on the front doors of each container, some of the factors were that we discussed were best objects to represent the material, so a lot of back and forth on what those images should look like, the size of the icon, and for the overhead banner, we discussed color coding to fit in with the existing Office of Sustainability signage, a slogan or logo to enhance the brand. And just note here, the waste less, recycle more was used for the pilot, but it hasn't been adopted yet. The other factor that we looked at was the circular shape to represent a holistic waste approach, which has been an interesting shift from the traditional recycling symbol. And then what was discussed and agreed upon for the station itself was that the color of the container would run from the top to the bottom, including the backboard for each module. The openings would be slanted downward whenever possible to make them more accessible, and containers would be serviced from the front to support operational efficiency. On the next slide, we'll show you some before and after pictures of Lister Center. So the top is Lister Market, which is the upstairs dining area that has several tables for sitting to encourage people to dine in. All of the food here is served in reusable dishware, and disposable containers are only provided if people need their food to go. This location already had a built-in waste diversion station, so we had to work with what we had and try and match the new zero waste station program. So we placed colored decals on the front of the cupboard doors, and then we put metal inserts into metal colored inserts into the openings of each container to match the material stream colors as much as possible. So, and since the containers were built quite far apart, we set up stanchions to force users to enter from right to left so that they wouldn't all just go to one container. And at the bottom is Marina, the fast food and coffee service dining area. Here we're able to put in 2 of the standard zero waste stations. I also want to briefly mention that our Office of Sustainability did a couple of outreach sessions at the zero waste station in Lister Market, so the picture above. The first session was at the beginning of the year and engaged brand new students. Staff answered questions and explained how to sort the waste materials into the proper containers. And the second session was midterm and focused on more specific contaminants such as napkins in the mixed paper container. And we also set out table cards explaining the new program on all the tables in both Lister Market and Marina. And on the next slide, we'll take a look at before and after pictures of Sub. In Sub, we went from one main waste diversion station with several different waste streams, 32 solo landfill waste containers, and a couple of odd paper and cardboard recycling containers to 11 zero waste stations. Renovating the main station allowed for a new zero waste station, more room for washing, more microwaves, and also a reusable dish pickup and drop-off location. This main station is unique with no backboard and flat tops instead of slanted so that it's accessible from both sides. And the next slide, we'll just take a look at Hub before and after. This is our last pilot building, Hub Mall, which has a variety of shops, food vendors, and is also a student residence. We had to start from scratch in this building because very little was in place for diversion and there was no organics diversion with food vendors. We began with the 17 food vendors, and in order to get them started on the new zero waste program, we had to make some changes with the existing infrastructure. Initially, food vendors had to take their landfill waste to the compactor chute on the mall level, and any recyclables had to be brought downstairs to the rolling carts or metal cages. So what we did was knock down a wall to a vacant office down the same hallway as the landfill waste compactor chute on the mall level, put in some plumbing for a sink, and then turned it into a nice fancy recycle area for the food vendors. And now everything is all on one level, and all bins for landfill waste, recyclables, and organics are equally accessible. And after the new recycle area was constructed, we met with each food vendor individually, brought them their new recycling organics containers and a startup supply of compostable bags. Then we trained them on the new program and showed them the new recycle area. So that's it for me, and now back over to Shannon.
Great, thanks, Jessie. So now that the pilots were set up, we needed a plan to evaluate them and make improvements. So we wanted to make sure it was working before we expand it to the rest of campus. So we wanted to investigate material generation and composition, user behavior, as well as gather some feedback from users, so students and staff, on what they thought of the new stations and signage. I'm going to share some highlights from our hauler data, spot and mini audits that we did, as well as a user survey. We also conducted one full 24-hour audit and did a whole bunch of bin monitoring where we were just kind of observing users at the stations. So next slide shows some changes that we observed in the 3 pilot buildings. So Sub and Lister are comparing a 6-month period, so from August 2013 to January 2014, so before the pilot was rolled out, and then compared to August 2014 to January 2015. And so those pilots were both rolled out in August of 2014, so we kind of got to compare similar timeframes in 2 different years. And then Hub is looking at just the month following implementation, so it was implemented in February. So one thing to note about the organics numbers, the organics are measured on a per tip basis. So for example, with Sub, where you see a 53% increase, that's more like an increase in volume than it is in weight. So just keep that in mind. So it means that some of these, if we were to look at weights, would be probably a little bit inflated depending what was in the bin. So we're looking at volumes there. The landfill weights, however, are actual weights from our waste hauler. So as you can imagine, we're pretty excited with these results. Sub organics collection more than doubled. And the landfill compactor, while still picked up at the same frequency, is never overweight anymore, which was a problem that we were often having. We think in Lister there's a bit of a smaller change, which is probably because the system in their kitchen is where a lot of the food waste comes from, and it was working quite well before we implemented the zero waste station. So we didn't increase collection capacity there as much as we did at Sub and Hub. And then in Hub, in just 1 month following the implementation, they collected 2,300 kilograms of organics for composting. So you can see the landfill waste produced also went down, and we've actually been able to reduce the pickup of the compactor at Hub from twice a week to once a week. So pretty significant results as far as we're concerned. On the next slide, just looking at some general trends that we saw from doing sort of some mini audits and bin monitoring. So overall, we're definitely seeing more waste diversion, so more things being recycled or composted instead of put in the landfill bin. We're not seeing really high capture of organics yet, so there's still a lot ending up in the landfill bin, but we're seeing really high purity of our organic stream. And so we collect food scraps as well as all of the sort of paper-related supplies, and so compostable containers and napkins and everything. And most people seem to be using it correctly, which is exciting. We're getting more recyclables than we used to, but having a little bit more contamination in those streams. So for example, in the mixed paper bin, a lot of people are placing their napkins or dirty fiber food containers in the mixed paper bin instead of in organics. So that's something that we kind of need to work on communicating a little bit better to students. So the last piece of our evaluation was a user survey that was done online by people using the Students' Union building and the Lister zero waste stations to get their feedback and learn about what items were most confusing. So we heard things that were consistent, which is good, with what we had observed in our waste audits and during bin monitoring. So some of the most confusing items for people were napkins, takeout containers and clamshells, coffee cups and pop cups, as well as cutlery. So one of the things we're going to try and improve is to clarify some of those key problem items and make them pop a little more on the signage. We're also going to try some fun outreach activities like sticking napkins to signs or sticking a pop cup to a sign to make it really more interactive. We also got told we should space our images out a little bit more, as well as possibly add some key messages or key terms to the signs for, again, sort of those confusing items to help people out. So as far as the stations themselves, we had a few things pointed out to us for improvement. So everyone really liked that they're fully color-coded. That was something we heard consistently. And everyone seemed to like the icons on the front. They found it sort of a nice, quick, first glance indication of where to put their materials. The main feedback was that perhaps a different opening on the mixed paper bin would help be a little bit of a point of choice prompt for people. So more of a slot like I've shown on the left. So our next round that we've ordered for Hub Mall is actually going to have this slot. So we get to kind of test that out and see if it makes a difference with contamination in that bin. We also need to do a little bit to increase contrast on the backboard. So we're playing around with some ideas there to make the signs stand out a little bit more and waste a little bit less space. You can see there's quite a thick border, and a lot of people kind of thought that was a waste of space. So a few improvements to make, but overall, we're pretty happy with these stations. So next steps, we're going to work on modifying the signage and stations, as I said. We're going to be rolling out to the public space in Hub Mall, so another post-consumer location, over the summer. We're going to be looking to update and bring on board food vendors who already collect organics under the older multi-stream system, the sort of 6-stream system, and we're going to try and bring them on board with our new 4-stream system so that everything's more consistent across campus. And then we've also got 2 large food vendors, the Faculty Club as well as Dewey's, which is a little restaurant, that haven't been collecting organics yet, so we're going to be working on getting them on board. And 1 new office building, a very large engineering building, is going to be one of the first, or the first building, more of an office building with this new 4-stream zero waste system. So we'll get to see how it works there as well. And then procurement. So obviously this needs to be part of our strategy. If we can control what we are actually giving to people on campus, and it's easier to use the system. So we're making some strides with food vendor contracts. When they're up for renewal, the contracts are going to actually ban polystyrene. And then we've developed some guidelines for food vendors to help them in their decision making when they're purchasing to-go containers and that sort of thing. So we're working with them kind of along the way. And then communication and outreach is sort of the last step. And we're working with our Office of Sustainability as well as the Students' Union. They have a student group there who's really keen to help with some fun outreach as soon as September hits. So we're going to be on the road as soon as the fall term hits again. So with that, we'd just like to say thank you again, and we've included our contact information here as well. So if you want to try and get in touch with us at a later time, we'd be happy to hear from you. So thanks. Thank you.
So thank you both again. And we're going to just take a few minutes of questions, but before we do, or I guess, nope, we're perfect. We're going to take a few minutes of questions, and obviously I don't want to waste too much of your guys' time, so I'm going to try and pick and choose from ones that were earlier to ones that just came in. So this is for Carrie. When looking at colleges have composting programs, was there any distinction made between a front of house and back of house type operation?
Yes. Well, only in the STARS report did they provide that that distinction. So not for most of them. That was only for the 130, whatever it was, from that program. And I could forward that information if whoever is asking that would like to send me an email.
Excellent. One more for you, Carrie. Does the information on 90% conversion mean conversion to both CO2 and biomass, or does it mean that 90% is converted to CO2?
No, it's either to CO. Most of it's going to go off as CO2, but some of it will be incorporated into the cell biomass. So it's both.
Okay, excellent. For Dr. Cade, can Texas State and University of Alberta folks, or I guess it's for both of you guys, both talk about how they deal with post-consumer bin contamination with non-compostable materials?
Tina, do you want to go first?
Sure. So if we have contamination that's coming out to the site, I mean, it's not that big of a deal for our students because we're pulling out and handling everything by hand. So the students go through and they rake out the stuff that has contaminated the piles. And one of our biggest problems right now are straws. And then we also have a problem with Coca-Cola cups that are non-compostable. Part of our problem is that different dining halls have different amounts of compostable containers. So at one dining hall, a Coke cup is compostable, but at another one it isn't. So like the University of Alberta, we're trying to work with the dining halls to get more compostable materials and to have consistencies amongst them. But yeah, we pretty much just rake things out right now.
And at the University of Alberta, cleaning staff are trained if it's really contaminated to place in the landfill waste bin. And then if there are some smaller contaminants, it's sorted out at our facility, so it's not too much of an issue on that end.
Excellent. I'm not sure if this is for Dr. K, but I think it is. How do you get food vendors who all have different contracts to use compostable products? Oh, I think this is actually for Shannon and Jesse. At the end, and all their different contracts end at different times. Some vendors will say, hey, why should I do it when this vendor doesn't have to?
Yeah, so we've been working really hard to build some really good working relationships with our vendors and get them on board as we go. So a couple of different tactics. One is definitely contracts. Our students' union building, all the contracts end at the same time, so that one will be a little bit more straightforward. And so it'll be implemented at the same time. And then in Hub, they do all end at different times. And so it's a little bit more of a behavior change and values discussion there about bringing them on board into the program and making it part of the culture here. And then in addition, one thing we've done, for example, is there's a program here called Green Spaces Certification, where you can get sort of kudos and a little badge for doing certain sustainable actions. And so our Office of Sustainability runs that program, and they developed a new checklist for food vendors. And so they've actually, in some cases, ended up almost competing with each other over sort of who's the most green. So we've been coming at it from that angle until we can kind of get those contracts on board, and it makes the transition easier as we go as well, because there's no kind of no surprises at the end of the day once the contracts are renewed. So definitely sort of multiple approaches, and it's not perfect, but it's coming along.
Okay, next question again for Shannon and Jesse. Are there any outreach/training/development programs for commercial composters? We have no conventional access to commercial composting or compost facilities and are loath to create our own processing system on campus-owned land. Since we have no curricular/research tie-in and already overworked/facilities and ground staff, any recommendations on how we could partner with local farms to develop commercial compost enterprises that we could feed with our dining hall food waste? And maybe Carrie might have a better thought.
Was that
on
for
that
me?
too. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's more of a general question.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're pretty lucky. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm sure what you were about to say is you have a commercial composter at hand, so.
Yeah.
And that, as I was saying, that as those programs arise, the more colleges will be able to access them. And I would say, if that is not the case and you are looking to do that, I would start with your local recycling coordinator, who would probably have access to who might be doing composting, or at least knowledge of that. Or the other way to do that is through cooperative extension. Most cooperative extension agents or counties have a cooperative extension agent that might know who would, if there's local, especially an organic farm, might be willing to start a composting, but not necessarily. It could be any small farm. Sounds like it might be a small college in this case. So looking for those connections. And then in terms of the advice of actually starting the program, there are, as I said, a number of resources available, starting with just identifying other colleges of your similar size to talk to and model after.
All right, so this is kind of the last question for anyone to weigh in on, and then we're going to have to close out here. If there is any choice between, if there is any choice between a compostable or recyclable packaging option, which option do you guys think is best? Carrie, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, so if it can be recycled, that's a higher and better use. And if you think about the recycling circle, if you can take a plastic and make it into a plastic, or paper make it into a paper, that's a much shorter return than taking paper and making it into compost and growing new fiber to make more paper. So if there's a recycling option, that's usually a better option. But certainly for food soiled papers or food soiled containers, they can't go to recycling, and so composting is a better option in those cases. So it really depends, and then it also gets into your recycling markets and what's available to you. So it's a fairly complicated question. But in general, recycling, direct recycling is, if it's a closed loop, is better. If it's going to China, getting bundled into plastics and ending up in China with questionable labor practices, that changes the equation. One of the things one of the things about composting is that it is always a local endeavor. It builds local communities and local infrastructure because it's too wet and heavy to move very far. So typically composting is happening within 50 to 100 miles of when it's generated, and the compost gets used within an equal radius. So it's much more of a local infrastructure development than recycling, which tends to be much more national and international.
I think the only thing I would add, this is Shannon from the U of A, is sort of the user experience is something that we're considering as well. So we're trying to make whatever products we choose a very obvious thing for our customers to be able to dispose of at the end. And so, like Carrie said, if it's something that's going to end up food soiled, we're trying to go with compostables. We're kind of steering somewhat clear of some of the compostable plastics just because all the other plastics on campus are recyclable, and so we feel like that's going to send a bit of a mixed message. So we are kind of considering it from that angle as well.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, I'd love to answer all the other questions. Oh, sorry. Did someone else want to jump in?
It's okay. I was just going to say that we've had some of the same issues with the recycling and compostable messages that we're sending to students, that it can get really, really confusing with the signage and such. So thank you.
Thanks. So we're going to have to move on here, but I'll remind you that at the end we'll have everyone's emails and whatnot posted when we post up the webinar. We want to take this opportunity to share with you an additional resource that is available to colleges and universities' organic recovery programs. The Food Packaging Institute is a trade association representing companies at all levels of the food packaging industry in North America, including raw materials and machinery suppliers, packaging converters, food service distributors, and operators and retailers. Many of their member companies have roles with dining services found on college campuses. From this unique position, FPI can help schools source the right package to support their waste reduction and composting goals. FPI offers a free membership to food service directors to help you stay updated on packaging trends, legislative issues, and new packaging options. You can also contact FPI's president, Lynn Dreyer, at 571-255-4211, or email her at ldyer@fpi.org to consult about your campus's options with food service packaging. And below are additional links to food service packaging databases and links to download their new strategic resourcing guide and to the FPI stewardship program. Please check them out. In closing, we have a few housekeeping notes to share with everyone. Following this webinar today, you should receive a prompt to complete a quick survey about the conference. We encourage you to take a minute to give us feedback on today's program. As you can see, we still have a full slate of webinar programs upcoming. Our next program in August will be Learning from Failure: How to Reboot and Learn from Operational Bloopers on Thursday, August 13th from 1 p.m. until 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Tune in to hear examples of spectacular flops and how campuses picked up the pieces and found success on the rebound. For full details to register for this and the other two remaining programs, please visit the CURC website at www.curc.org. Have a great day, everyone. Goodbye.